The rules of the road apply to everyone equally. Teresa is asking, are law enforcement legally allowed to speed while in their cruisers but don't have their lights and sirens on? She says, I travel Paris Pike daily and often get passed by cruisers not on a call, speeding, sometimes 70 to 80 miles per hour. I know this because I get behind them and try to keep up. Well, here is Victor Puente with the answer.
Well, first off, if you're going that fast, you're also speeding, so don't do that. But no, technically, those officers should not be speeding unless they've activated their lights and sirens. State law says police and other emergency vehicles are exempt from state laws about speed under the following circumstances: whenever they're responding to emergency calls, or when police vehicles are in pursuit of an actual or suspected violator of the law, or when ambulances are transporting a patient to medical care facilities. But the law also says they must give a warning, which includes lights and sirens, and paramedics can skip that siren if it'd be bad for their patient. Emergency vehicles can also go through stop signs and red lights and travel in the opposite direction if they need to. So that's the technical answer. There's also the practical answer. Doug Dahl, the director of communication for the Washington Traffic Safety Commission, wrote about when he was first starting as a deputy and only drove the speed limit on the freeway. He said that would lead to traffic backing up because people would attempt to pass, realize it was law enforcement, and then not be able to get over. Quote, I decided that driving a few miles an hour over the speed limit was better than packing a bunch of cars together on the freeway. Now, state law does say people driving emergency vehicles are expected to operate the vehicle with due regard for the safety of all persons using the street or highway. If you have a good question, just email us. A good question at WKYT.com. I'll see you on WKYT Mornings.